I'm thrilled to be back in service with you all again. I think about you often, and I pray for you much. And there's a lot that I could say about Faith Tabernacle and its leadership, but it would take too long. I will say this, your pastor and Pastor Larito have seemingly to me gone out of their way to be my friend. And it has been extremely valuable. And he's talking about that invention, the phone. Mr. Bell invented the telephone part, and they have greatly advanced it since then. One man said that the phone has just become this seldom used app on my phone. And if you use it on me, I'm furious. But your pastor and Pastor Tim, and they've texted me and called me and encouraged me at what may seem as random times to them, but have been heavenly ordained times on my end. And I know if you go to church here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I feel like they've been too good to me for what little I've been able to do for them, but I appreciate it tremendously. I'm very, very thankful that you all are extremely blessed that my wife is here tonight. That does not happen very often, hardly ever anymore. And I would ask her if she has anything to say, but I already know that she does not. She never does. And if I force the point, I get in trouble. And I don't want to be in trouble. So I shall not force the point. I have many friends in this church. Brother Phil and his company, his wonderful wife and his great children. And we have many different ties together. And Brother Bradley and myself and our ministries and so many. I could go on. I even have blood kin that goes to this church. He probably has never told you that, and I would understand why. That would be embarrassing for him. But Brother Trevor's his mom is my second cousin. And see, he never told you, did he? I'm telling you, I understand why he didn't. But I love this church. As somebody that runs an organization of companies and ministries, if you don't know about, I guess I should say this, if you don't know about HMA Ministries, Holiness Missions to America, hit me up after service and I'll give you some information about it. I'm not going to talk much about it tonight, but we have over 700 ministries in 18 states and 5 countries. We run homeless missions, drug rehabs, battered women and children shelters. We have 13 of our own churches. We control our own anti-abortion pregnancy centers on the East Coast, whole bunch of different things, battered women and children shelter. The state of Texas contracts with us to take their young ladies that are rescued from sex trafficking in the state of Texas to move them to Oklahoma to get out of the areas where they're were trafficked in. Many things. You can read about it later. But doing all of that, it takes an amazing amount of structure. And structure is something that I have come to learn to adore. I love organization, structure, authority, people that follow well and listen well, and things that don't happen in church very often. But it's something that I love about this church. I can tell, maybe you can't, maybe you can, but somebody that has to deal with structure all day, every day with a 300 plus member staff, I walk in here and I see things done very intentionally. And I'll say this, it may sound kind of scolding. There's no scolding to it. It's a praise. But if this is the only church you ever go to, you probably have no idea how blessed you are. I go to hundreds of churches, and many times I'm in them and I'm wishing I was here. Because everybody's just doing their own thing and it drives me crazy. But I come in here and I see people intentionally greeting people and approaching people, and the way the choir works and the way the offering's taken up and the way people are dismissed off the platform. I notice those things. And they're important. For one reason and one reason only, I believe structure is important to God. Because God knows the more structured his church is, the better it will function. And the better the church functions, the more lost souls will reach in a certain period of time. Now would you say amen? Amen. Praise God. Joshua chapter 24 and verse 14. Joshua 24 and 14. An evangelist doesn't get to say what I'm about to say very often, but I'm going to preach this message for the first time. And I believe with all my heart the Lord prepared me last week for this service. And I'll tell you this before I read this verse. A great man of God said many, many years ago, 50-some years ago, he said, every sermon that is preached takes for itself a certain amount of authority. And I'm here to say up front, except for whatever authority that the Word of God already takes for itself, I take none. This isn't my pulpit, my place, my church. I've been granted a tremendous blessing by the pastor to have a space of time behind his pulpit. And I take no authority, but I attempt to tell you what the Lord told me to tell you. Pray for my voice if you get a chance. It's been troubling me all day. But let's read a couple of verses. Joshua 24 and verse 14, the Bible says, now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Mighty God in heaven, Lord, please, please, please do this. In Jesus' holy name. Amen. You be seated if you'd like. The Lord would be my helper this evening. I want to preach to you about make the house that you have into the home that you want. Make the house that you have into the home that you want. In the opening of Treatise on the French Revolution by Charles Dickens, in the book A Tale of Two Cities, the first paragraph reads like this: it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going directly to heaven. And we were all going directly down the other way. I've often heard this paragraph used as succinctly the place where the children of Israel were in Joshua chapter 24. I understand that and I acknowledge that. But I also want you to know that in many ways it is exactly where we are in America in 2020. This is the best of times, and this is the worst of times. We have more money, more conveniences. We can travel farther, faster. We have bigger homes, nicer homes, newer cars, more advanced technologies. And at the exact same time, we have far more depression and far more suicides. And we are far more irritated. And we have way more divorces and far more addictions. And more people in our prisons. And more people in our homeless shelters. And more people going crazy than ever before. This is truly the best of times and truly the worst of times. In the book of Joshua, Joshua had been the steady understudy of Moses, and when Moses died, God calls Joshua and basically tells him, as I was with Moses, so will I be with you. Just like when Moses led the people to the Red Sea and God parted it, so when God leads you to the Jordan River, he will part it. God went with Joshua and the people, and they wrought great victories, and God showed them his mighty hand over and over again. They conquered Jericho. They had some failure there at Ai, but God helped them to rout the Amorites and the Jebusites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Canaanites, and God has brought them through so much stuff up to this point, and everything that they have ultimately needed, God has provided. Can anybody in here say with Brother Sloggett tonight, God has brought me through some junk? Now Joshua's old, and he's going to die, and he calls the children of Israel to the valley of Shechem. In the valley of Shechem is where Abraham built an altar. It's where Jacob dug a well. And it's in the valley of Shechem is where Moses' bones are buried. And this valley that is regnant with Israel's past is now pregnant with Israel's future. And this is where Joshua begins to tell them all about the blessings that they're about to receive. Joshua begins to explain to them how good their society is going to be, so much better than it has been for hundreds and hundreds of years. But it didn't come without a warning. You're going to receive houses that you didn't build, wells that you didn't dig, olive groves and vineyards that you didn't plant. And when you receive all of those blessings, Joshua teaches the people of God, there is an extreme danger that comes with it. The danger is of you getting so distracted with those things that you forget exactly how you came by those things. You will become so enamored with the blessings that you will begin to ignore the blessor. You can get so easily and fatally distracted trying to have your new house that you never get your new home. So Joshua gets the people together and he says, you have a choice. You need to make up your minds here and now. This is the place. You could serve the gods of the other side of the flood, or you could serve the gods from whose land you dwell. But each individual has to make their own mind up. Serve the gods that you once left, or serve the God that's never left you. Serve the God of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites. But he says this, as for me and my new house, and those that dwell therein, we will serve the Lord, or the word translated Jehovah. Joshua was no doubt attempting to cause the people to contemplate the power of God, the presence of God, and the provisions of God before making their final decision. Look what he has done. Look what he has provided. Look where you should be if you got what you really deserved, and look where you somehow still are by the help of this God. The message is identical for the Israelites in Joshua 24 as it is for you right now. Look what you have compared to what you and God know you deserve. And beyond just contemplating, there's definitely a confrontation and a confronting of consequences, because what you decide to do with your home, regardless of what you decide to do with your house, what you decide to do with your home will have many, many, many years of ramifications on you and on many other people that are connected to you. I want to get somewhere, and I need the Lord to help me. This verse 14 is a confrontation of a three-part command. Joshua was telling them that when you get into the promised land, when you get the good job, when you get the new house, when you're able to spend a little money, when you get able to save a little money, when you're finally able to do some traveling, you've got to remember these three things. Number one, make sure you fear God. Verse 14, he said, now therefore fear the Lord. Listen, it is easy for us to have a head knowledge of our need to fear the Lord. And we might be afraid of getting caught, or we might be afraid of going to hell. But this fear here is talking about an overwhelming awe of, an enormous respect for, an unbelievable admiration for. It's talking about not just afraid to get caught by or afraid to get punished by, but afraid not to please Him. Afraid not to worship Him. Afraid not to do it the way that you know He wants it done. Afraid to the point that whatever this world would do to you, you will not back down from serving God the Bible way. Since my beautiful, precious wife is here, I'll tell a story about her. We were young Christians raised in a very rural farm community in Oregon, Idaho border. And we had small children. We were trying to raise them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. And my first son was much more bullheaded, mouthy, rebellious than the other three. I have no idea where he got it from, but he got it. And as he began to get 4, 5, 6 years old, it began to get out of hand. And I told Mama, we're going to have to crack down on this. We're going to have to get a hold of this. We don't want this spirit that this 6-year-old boy, 7-year-old boy had. We don't want that spirit in a 13-year-old. Because by then, y'all, it's too late. So she began to crack down on him. I'm at work and she's at home, and there was some spankings involved and some different things. And he decided to just lash out and just talk back to Mama one time, real strong. And she popped that boy in the mouth. Some of you, I feel a little friction already. And I was at work and I got a phone call that there was a police officer that went to my house threatening to arrest my wife. So I left work. I hustled back to the house, They had taken my son out of school and had him tell them everything that a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old was willing to tell, which is a lot. And went down and told my wife if she hit him again, that she could get arrested. There's big trouble was coming. So I came home. The police officer happened to be a boy I went to school with. And I wasn't always saved. I'm one of them other kind of Christians. I was lost before I got saved. I know some of y'all never, I know. Been there so long, you think you've always been here. And I went up to the officer and asked him what trouble. He explained it all to me. I did the best I could to explain to him, where we were at on this deal. By my faith, by the scriptures. I said, we aren't beating this child. And I said, there's no marks. And if this child gets beat, you come arrest me. But if my wife corrects this child, and you come back here, somebody else is going to get a whooping. And there was some serious friction there in this little town of 2,600 people. You've been to Nyssa, Oregon. For a while. And we were made fun of, and there was some persecution involved, and we had to take our children out of the school system and go to the next town over and put them in a Mennonite school or whatever that was. Something similar to that. To get them into a private education. And it hasn't stopped since. I'm talking about persecution of our faith. Even now, because of the way that I preach and the way that I teach, I've got, and I'm sure several of you preachers could say the same thing, I've got people on the left of me that would help me out and promote me and cover for my ministry if I would just lighten up a little bit and not be so hard on sin and be so against the carnal world. And then I've got people on the right of me that would stop making life so hard on me and my family if I would just kind of get along with the good old system a little more. And what they don't understand is I can't. I know folk don't understand, but I can't. There is no perfect system on planet Earth, not even religious system, not even church system, not even Pentecostal system. The only perfect system is me fearing God enough to live in a way that He has impressed upon my conscience, that I allow Him to speak into my heart. And I say, God, I'm up early this morning. I'm seeking your face. I'm going out for the day. And I need to make sure when I come back tonight that me and you are still good. There will always be pressures to convince you to be less holy, less righteous, and you will fall for them without a strong fear of the Lord, a powerful respect for God. Oh, I fear Him, preacher. Okay, good. Praise God. That's great. Let me ask you this. Do you fear Him at work? Do you fear Him at home? When you are at your house and you're the only person at your house, do you fear Him? Because the worst thing that could happen, it's a trick of the devil, is that you fear him around this altar. And then you don't fear him in the foyer or in the parking lot. I'm telling you the truth, all right? I was in a church service preaching a camp meeting, and we were standing about right here in their church, right in front of the pulpit, right by the altar, and the brother said, "Can I tell you something?" And I said, "Sure." And he looked around, he said, "I don't want to tell you in the church. Let's go outside." I said, "I ain't going." Y'all better help me. I said, "I ain't going." I don't want to hear something you can't say in the church, because the way I read it, if I can't say it in the church, I can't say it out there. Number one was make sure that you fear God. I'm going to skip number two because I need to do it in this other order, but I'm going to tell you, I'll come back to it. Number three is you must do this if you're going to make the house that you have into the home that you want. According to the patriarch Joshua, to make the house that you have into the home that you want, you have to fear God and you have to put away other gods. Right there in the middle of verse 14, it says, put away other gods. If you want your home right, you must put away those things that you have allowed to get between you and God. If that career, if that money, if that swimming pool, if those vehicles, if those recreational vehicles, if your kids or your grandkids or your tanning appointment or your fishing trip or your game night with your friends or that girl or that boy, I'm just naming the easy ones to make you uncomfortable while you sit there and sweat to see if I'm going to pick yours or not. Anything that comes between you and God is a God of its own. And only you know what that thing is that you'll miss church for. Oh, only you know. Oh, help me, Jesus. Only you know what's that thing that you will skip your Bible study for. Only you know that thing that you will not pray all week because of. Only you can choose to get that out from between you and God. And unless and until you do that, your house cannot be the home that you want it to be, wish that it was, and know that it should be. I'll be very transparent. I always am. I'll tell you one of my biggest struggles. One of my biggest struggles is when we get down at the altar to pray during prayer meeting or during prayer time in the service or whenever the main prayer time is, maybe at the end of service at the altar call. I struggle to not use that time down there by myself while everybody else is praying, thinking about what I have to do the next day and what's going on in my business and what's going on in my ministry and who I need to call later and what I have to juggle to make it all work. I struggle with that. I will lay in bed at night sometimes and think and mull it over and over and over and get my phone out and type it out and then rearrange it on my phone. Anybody else here ever have that? My God was simply the busyness of being in charge of my busy life. That was my God. My God was being busily in charge of my busy life. It can be something so simple. And God finally taught me that I can go to sleep because He never does. When the Lord told me that one night, I went, duh! What have I been doing? God spoke right to me in my bedroom and said, Todd, you can go to sleep. I won't. somebody bigger than me, smarter than me, more qualified than me will still be in charge when I'm not. Hallelujah. If you want your house that you do have to become the home that you wish you had, you've got to fear God. You've got to put away your other gods. And you've got to serve the Lord with sincerity and truth. You know, when I got to that point there, Pastor Tim, about putting away other gods, and I began to type on my computer that we're trying to make our house a home by putting away other gods. That's the exact opposite of everything I know happens on a regular basis. If we have any false gods, they're probably at home. Oh, no amens, nowhere. That's all right. Most of the time, home is where we hide anything that we're doing that's not in the will of God. And being as though that is such a carnal thing to do and an anti-godly thing to do, it makes perfect sense that Joshua was trying to teach the exact opposite. And then he says, serve the Lord with sincerity and truth. Now, Joshua said, serve him in sincerity and in truth. And if I'm not mistaken, the English word sincere comes from two Latin words that mean without wax. Without wax. In the time that these words were derived, people made dishes out of clay and pottery. Matter of fact, my wife still does. She makes clay pottery dishes. And if a piece of clay or pottery that is a finished product has a flaw in it, what they would do is they would fill the flaw with wax, and it would just blend right into the pottery. Now, you got to understand, in the darker settings like the inside of a home hundreds of years ago would have been, when they didn't have near the lighting that we have now, the wax in the crack would generally go unnoticed to all the people in the house. But if one was to hold the pottery up to the pureness of the daytime sunlight, the wax was easily distinguishable from the clay. So he says, serve God in sincerity with no wax. See, you have some flaws and I have some flaws, and we're just going to smooth right over them and right over the outside of them, and we're going to come on into the house, and common folk like ourselves, and our vision is too darkened and too dimmed by our own struggles and our own carnality that we generally will not be pure enough to notice that which is truly wrong with you, because we're dealing with that which is going on with ourselves. But if you, sir, or you, ma'am, were to hold your flaws up to the pure light of the gospel, your flaws would be easily distinguishable from just being churchy to being godly, from just being religious to being righteous. And from those parts of you would be easily determinable from what you have not fully submitted to Christ compared to what you have fully submitted to Christ. This is why we're here right now. That is why we're preaching right now. So that the individual that sits in the pews can have the light of the gospel truth to compare themselves to, and they could know where the flaws are, and it'll be perfectly clear, and they have something to pull up to at the altar tonight and in their life this week and in their house, that they could make it a home. And when this occurs, the worst thing you could possibly do is trust that your wax is good enough. That no one really knows your flaws, and that's good enough. Sincerity, no wax. Means understanding that God sees everything for what it is in your heart, in your mind, in your spirit, and truly you are naked before him, and that your religion, even your eternity, is between you and him alone, and that is how you must approach every single subject matter of your life. It doesn't matter if it's your finances. It doesn't matter if it's your marriage. It doesn't matter if it's how you're going to deal with your 16-year-old. It doesn't matter if it's, am I going to leave this job and go to this job. It doesn't matter if I'm going to eat right or not eat right. What matters is everything you approach must be approached with the understanding that what I'm doing is naked before God, and everything I do is between me and God. So Joshua chapter 24, the great leader of Israel, confronts the people with a 3-part command. Fear God, put away other gods, and serve God without wax, or with sincerity and truth. And after confronting them with a command, he then is able to finally get around and confront them with a choice. He told them that they can serve the God of their fathers, or they can serve the gods of the Hittites or the Hivites or the Amorites or any other ites. Just pick your ites. And you could serve whoever you want to serve, but now you have to choose. And he says that famous statement, as for me and my house, there it is right there. His house that he intends to turn into a home. I wish I could bare my heart to you and let you understand the difference between a house and a home. When I was born, they took me to a house, but Pastor was never a home. My mother was a horrible alcoholic, and she left and came back at different times. And one time she left when I was 6 and my brothers were 2 and 8, and she just never came back. My dad worked 2 or 3 jobs. He would come home and we would wake up the next morning. We had no idea who the women were that were in the house when we got up, and we didn't know who was supposed to be there and who wasn't supposed to be there. And there was always random beatings and nobody knew why, and there was no explanation. And sometimes you got hurt because you were in trouble. Sometimes you got hurt because somebody was drunk. I'm telling you, there's a big difference between a house and a home. I thank God. At 25 years old, he saved me and began to show me that there's a difference between a house and a home, between 2 people that live together and 2 people that love together, between parents that will raise children and parents that just have children. It's hard to be the head of a household, but it is really hard to be the head of a home. But it's so worth it. I got 3 amazing sons. We have 3 amazing sons. I didn't even have them, she did. We have 3 amazing sons and 1 gorgeous daughter. And they're incredible. And they're flawed like every other human being. And they come across all kinds of problems and troubles. And Christians are not isolated away from the troubles in the world. And preachers are not insulated from all the troubles in the world. And pastors, You could have a godly pastor like you have, that is an amazing praying man, that is amazing preaching man, that is amazing soul-loving man, and he will face the exact same problems that you will. And it's happened over and over and over again in my home, where my son fell to that, where my daughter was attacked by that, where my wife came down with that, where my mind was bombarded with that. And when it happens, it is so hard. But when it does, somehow I muster up the strength to thank God that when I was 25 years old, He changed me from somebody that just was looking for a better house to somebody that wanted a home. Because my son, when he fell to that, he didn't hide it from me. He came and said, "Dad, help me." When my daughter got attacked by that, she didn't run away from us. She ran to my wife and said, "Can we talk?" There's a difference. There was a universe of difference between a house and a home. When my wife came under attack, when my mind came under attack, we'd get up in our bed, in our bedroom, in our home, and we would hold each other. We would talk about it, and we would pray about it. And we'd try to understand what each other's going through about it. There was a universe of difference between a house and a home. I don't know who that little guy is over there helping me, but I hope he keeps on helping me. As for me and my house, I believe with all my heart Joshua was telling him, God's going to bless you all with houses that you didn't build. And I'm going to get one too. And I'm going to make mine into a home. I'm going to get a structure to sleep in, but I want one that I can rest in. Anybody here had a place to lay down, but you couldn't get no rest? I'm going to get a place where I can get a piece of bread in, but I'm going to make it a place where my soul can be fed in. As for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. Just like Elijah when he told the people, "How long halt ye between two opinions? If Baal be God, serve Baal. But if God be God, then serve him." They were both saying the same thing. They were saying, you've got to choose. Moses said it in Deuteronomy 30 and 15. "See, I have set before thee this day life and death and good and evil, and you've got to choose." Jesus said in Matthew 6 and 24, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." See, you've got to choose. Maybe I'll make my last point right here. Look at the beginning, verse 15, right there where we read. "And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve." Now, who in their right mind would think that it is evil to serve God. The one that created all things, the one that holds life and death in the palm of his hands, the one that broke the bondage of these same people and brought them up out of Egypt with a high hand and kept their clothes from wearing out and their shoes from wearing out, kept them warm at night and cool and fed during the day. This seems like a sarcastic question to me. I could sarcastically ask you the same question. Who here in their right mind would think that it's a bad thing, a wrong thing, would think that it's evil to serve the God that keeps you alive and protects you and keeps a roof over your head and brought you through all kinds of stuff? Who here is crazy enough to think that it would be wrong to serve God with all your heart? And so he reiterates the choice. He said you could serve the God of the Hivites, the God of the Amorites, the God of the Jebusites, or you could serve the God Jehovah. Think about what a mockery this question really is. He basically says, now that Jehovah God has destroyed all the people groups before us, you can now serve their gods that they were serving when Jehovah massacred them for us, or you could serve Jehovah, the God that won all of these battles. Hello? When he asked this question, they weren't sitting there going, A or B. It's not what was happening. They were either saying, God, we'll serve God, or they were sitting there thinking, what an idiot I've been. I need to do better. Can I tell you tonight? I hope you're either agreeing with me, say, yes, God, or I hope you're sitting there saying, man, what a knucklehead I've been. I need to do even better. That's what I hope is happening right now. Then Joshua finally, I'm winding this down here in just a moment. Joshua finally makes his real point when he says, as for me and my house, I'm sorry, y'all, and please forgive me if I say this wrong or don't take it wrong. You don't get no brownie points in heaven for going to Faith Tabernacle. It's an amazing place, and I love it. But that's not, oh, help me, Lord. I made two of them mad. There's no extra credit for being Pentecostal or holiness or assembly in eternity. As much as I think there probably should be, there probably is no special points for sitting under Brother Snow. Or having a last name Snow. Or Moreno. Or Lorito. I'm not just picking on them. They're some of the only people in this building I know their last name. Do you know what his point is? I needed to take about 35, 40 minutes, or you wouldn't really think that I came with a real sermon, and you might shortchange me on the offering or something. But really, I can give you my whole sermon in the next 5 seconds. All that other was just fluff. Here's my sermon right here. Nobody is really serving God that isn't serving Him in their house. If there's a time when you're home in the morning, early, in the night, late, in the middle of the afternoon by yourself, where you do what you want. Now, I'm not saying you can't drink half a gallon of sweet tea at your house. I don't care. I'm not saying you can't turn on your favorite song and dance by yourself in the kitchen when nobody's watching. I don't care. What I'm saying is there is a perfect plan and will of God for every single individual, and you can't escape it. And as a general rule, I feel like if we do escape it, we escape it in an area where we think we have our own domain. This is my house. I'll do what I want to. I pay the bills around here. I see. Oh, God, help us. The God around this altar. The God behind this pulpit has got to be the God of your living room, the God of your bedroom, the God of your back patio. Oh, God, help me. Too many people are putting their kind face on and putting their modest apparel on and putting their amen voice on and going to church and then going back to their house and putting their normal scowl back on their face around their families and putting their regular inappropriate attire back on their bodies. And putting their angry, arrogant, obnoxious tone back in their voice for everybody else. And they are decent to the preacher and miserable to their spouse. And they're loving to the animals at the pet store, but they're terrible to their children. Please pay attention. If people that live at your house don't have to have respect and dignity and morals and follow clocks and follow rules and follow schedules, they're going to have a hard time being decent workers or decent students or decent churchgoers. If people that live at your house, I'm just meddling now. If people that live at your house do not have sane, serious, spiritual, productive, difficult conversations at your house, they're going to struggle to not fail and fall for the fantasy worlds that society keeps tricking them with. And please, please don't try to play all lovey-dovey with your spouse in public or love all up on her at the Valentine's banquet after you've been putting her down and disrespecting her and not having productive, sane, spiritual, difficult conversations with her in your home. Now, I'm a professional counselor, so I know a few things that I've counseled a couple thousand people. And I can tell you this. Most people that have marital problems that sit in my office that want to work out things in my office with their marriage, we find out very quickly that the things that they're willing to say to me or say to each other in my office, they have never even tried to say to each other at home. Makes it real easy on me. I know what the problem is. Almost from the beginning. You don't love each other enough. You don't respect each other enough. You don't understand each other enough. You're not trying hard enough to make this work, so it's come to this. You have a house, but you need a home. How do we make the house that we have into the home that we want? You make sure that you fear God at home. Starts at home. You put away other gods at home. Starts at home. Like I said, we do this backwards. We keep our other gods at home. We serve the Lord with no wax, with sincerity and truth at home. Starts at home. Any children's workers in the house? Children's ministry workers? How many times mom and dad let their kids run wild? They get out of hand. They treat the craziness with a treat. And all that does is teach them, if they're hungry, to act stupid. Man, I like them treats we got last week. How did we get them? We crayoned on the wall, remember? Okay, let's do it again. What are you guys doing? We want a treat. They let them act crazy at home. Then they bring them here, turn them over to y'all. Oh, y'all ain't going to help me now? And they'll throw a fit on you if you can't make them sit still for 30 minutes. They ain't never sat still for 30 minutes in their life. A home is so important. It's where it all starts. When you serve God correctly at your house, it is so much easier to serve Him everywhere else. The difference between not fully serving Him at home and having that as your safe space to do kind of what you want, and then having to straighten up everywhere else, compared to getting it totally right between you and God and you and God and your spouse and you and God and your spouse and your children and you and God and your spouse and your children and anybody that comes on your property, getting it all right there. And then all you do when you go anywhere else is just keep doing what you're doing. I got to quit. But the trap is this idea that as long as I serve God everywhere else, I can do what I want at my house. It's a lie from the pits of hell. The only problem is that'll work for a house, but it won't work for a home. Stand all over this house. Every head bowed, every eye closed, every saint of God praying. I'm not really into big over-the-top altar calls anymore. Nothing wrong with them. They just aren't working for me these days. So I'll simply give an official invitation this way. Lord, I remember having several houses. Wouldn't want to go back to a single one of them. But God, You've given us a home. I thank you so much for it. We face everything that hell bombards us with, just like everybody else does. But we're set up to deal with it correctly. And if we don't know the answers, we know how to get them. And a home is so less stressful. And it has so much more transparency and so much more communication. And the children are so much more at peace. And there's so much less medication in it. And the police don't come there. And nobody screams there. And nobody cries out in pain and agony. And nobody lays in their bed holding themselves, rocking themselves to sleep, tears wetting their pillows. God, I pray somebody come to the altar. Grab your spouse, grab your children, bring your friend, bring yourself. Say, Lord, I got a house. I got a house. I got a house. I want a home. I want a home.